Ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest. The calls for ANC politicians to footsack is just, well, gaining momentum. And to be honest, they really should, because our leaders out of the ANC are just retarded. But before we get on to the main news of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, as it really does help. So let's get on to the news stories of today. And I've got quite a few to cover. I mean, some of them are kind of rehashes of other stories and some progressions on them. And there's some real doozies in this one. So anyway, let's start off with the first one. Now, this is the news story that two Parliamentary Oversight boards, specifically the Portfolio Committee on Defence and Military Veterans and the Portfolio Committee on International Relations and Cooperations, will jointly meet with Ministers Angie and Ronald Lamola to discuss the SANDF's Chief General's diplomatic statements in Iran, in which he endorsed common goals with Iran, backing its Gaza stance, and delivered what was described as a political signal. Now, concerns include a disconnection between defense diplomacy and South Africa's official foreign policy, public distancing by the Department of International Relations and Cooperations, and the ill-advised remark from the presidency. Ill-advised basically being Ramaphosa saying he didn't know anything about it, and then his defense minister saying, she sanctioned it, it was all fine. Now, ultimately, the parliamentary chairs are set to reinforce that the SANDF is apolitical and constitutionally mandated to provide a certain role, and stress that it's important to be unified and coherent in terms of its international engagements, and that it shouldn't be, politicking. But as you know, with the ANC, everything's politics. So let's move on to the next news story. And this is the news story that South Africa's hero, Ian Cameron, the hero of the country, was well engaged in an attempted hijacking yesterday. Somebody tried to hijack Ian Cameron. Now, the Parliamentary Police Portfolio chairperson, Ian Cameron, alongside his DA colleagues, were attacked after leaving a police training academy in Cape Town. Now, 3 men approached their vehicle and smashed at least 3 windows with bricks. Injuries were sustained to, pretty much everybody, and I'm assuming that's from falling glass and, from the bricks. Now, a first arrest, an 18-year-old suspect was shot during the attack. Get on you, Ian. We know that we can count on you. And was later traced to a hospital in Mitchell's Plain, where he sought medical attention for the gunshot wound, and he's since been charged and remains under police guard. Now, a second arrest, a 16-year-old suspect, was arrested in Brown's Farm in the early hours of Wednesday morning, and both faced charges of attempted murder and attempted hijacking. And police confirmed that a third suspect is still at large, with another arrest expected soon. The only thing I would question is how arrests in this case occurred so quickly, but in many others it doesn't. And so it comes as no surprise that the National Police Commissioner has praised the Violent Crime Unit for their swift work. They've condemned the attack as a direct threat to public safety and democratic institutions. Democratic institutions with the ANC, as if they care. In any case, they warned perpetrators of violent crime and said that SAPS would deploy all resources to track them down. Now, the Police Training Centre also called the attack on the MPs appalling, and that it was a grave concern for the community, and welcomed the arrest and said criminals have no place in the community. I agree, so let's maybe follow the PA's suggestion and bring back the death penalty. Just my suggestion. In any case, let's get on to the main stories of today, and there is a story I really want to focus on because it's just retarded. And I'm at that point now where I'm just like, thoughtful with our politicians. They clearly hate us, and in hating us, I think we should really just despise them back. So let's go on to the main story. And this is a story that the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, has insisted that the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment, the BBBEE Act, is not discriminatory. Now, the BBBEE, according to him, corrects past injustices and promotes inclusive growth by empowering historically disadvantaged groups. Now, this comes amid pressure from the US on South Africa over its racial equity laws. The DA itself has criticized the Employment Equity Amendment Act, which is set to give racial targets to private businesses, all under the purview of the Labour Minister. And so with the failing state of the South African economy, this has led many individuals to question whether or not BEE is responsible for that and whether it should be scrapped. Now, during the White House visit, Ramaphosa faced questions from Donald Trump, who demanded exemptions for US companies from BEE rules and cited videos of Julius Malima's chanting of Kill the Boer as showing that there was, shall we say, racial discrimination in South Africa. Now, Paul Mashatile has stressed that government will align its policies with inclusive growth and economic opportunities and equal opportunities. He says that government intends to pursue structural reforms for competitiveness and trade, especially under the African Continental Free Trade Area. And according to him, they need to keep pushing employment equity, skills development, and affirmative action as core tools of transformation. But the question really has to become as to what exactly have they transformed? So first off, I have to ask the question as to why Paul Mashatile is so wedded to the idea of BEE. Now, Paul Mashatile, a 63-year-old man, is apparently worth 55 million rand. He earns a public salary of around 3 million rand annually, and noticeably has sizable property portfolios, including one in Constantia worth nearly 30 million rand, one in Waterfall worth 37 million rand, and additional properties in Johannesburg and Kevlin. So let's be honest, he's got a declared net worth of 55 million rand and property assets that amount to over 65 million rand. So you may be tempted to ask yourself, well, what exactly has Paul achieved in business? I mean, he's clearly a big proponent of black economic empowerment and transformation in the business sector, so what has he done? Well, he served as Gauteng's Transport, Roads and Public Works MEC. He worked as MEC for Finance and Economic Affairs. He worked as the Minister of Arts and Sports and Culture. He was responsible for the launch of the Transformation Fund, which championed inclusive economic policies. Oh, wait, yeah, that's the BEE Fund. Ah, interesting. So a guy who's been a professional politician his whole life, he only earns around 3 million rand a year. Pretty rich, huh? One would be tempted to ask the question as whether or not these transformation funds are directly benefiting him himself. Because one would have to ask the question as to how you get that rich without any business activities from purely a government job where you've only served as MECs. Now, you see, a normal person would think about this and would ask the questions. But you see, the ANC expects its voters to be too stupid to understand that. But you see, the problem is that voters aren't stupid anymore. In fact, have a look yourself as to what this young gentleman had to say about BEE.
Folks, let me say something. If you are a black South African and you are still obsessed with race when it comes to picking your politicians, you have clearly not read the room. Because the room and the mood in South Africa says we need people in positions of power who can do the job. You look at Peter Groenevalde by Correctional Services. What he's doing, he's getting the prisoners to bake bread, empowering them with skills for entrepreneurship, and also just being able to be a good employee who knows how to make good bread. They are countering the mainstream price of bread, which is 23 rand. Those guys are making bread 8 rand. Peter says, I'm planning on taking this nationwide. That's what he wants to do. That's the type of man that I can see. He cares, you know. He wants to make this country better. And he wants to make it work. Now, some people will look at me and call me somebody who's been colonized. You know, my mind has been colonized. They will never say, no, this guy is logical. He's looking at this logically and objectively. And he sees what can work. No, they'll say, I'm an Uncle Tom, I'm a bootlicker, and things like that. Low IQ people and people like that do not even face me anymore, bro. They don't faze me anymore. Man, can we stop with race politics and find all good people in South Africa who can get us out of this mess that we are in? Whether Indian, colored, black, it doesn't matter. We are the peasants down here fighting, and Abu Ramaphosa are having a nice time, and then he turns around to ask, why are you guys poor and we are rich? Why are the white people black person? Man, telling you guys, man. Telling you. Use this. No emotions, no. Use this. Don't be black and slow. Don't be black and dumb. Use your brain. On time.
Now, you see, it's important to understand that the pushback against BE and where it would ultimately go has been in the works for some time. In 1998, advocate Martin Bracey, a prominent labor lawyer, wrote in the Industrial Law Journal about the original Employment Equity Act. According to him, it will be the first major piece of race-based legislation to enter the statute books since our country became democratic. In any society, this would be significant. In ours, it's a watershed signifying the perpetration of precisely the industrialized race consciousness that has already proved so divisive and destructive in our countries. Now, we're meant to take from all this, and we're told repeatedly that apparently our laws are not racist and they're not discriminatory. But everybody knew they were from day one. Now, the advocate ultimately concluded, in short, the system that will make the act work is already in place. All we need to do is revive it. True, say the social engineers, but it is necessary all the same. Apartheid was a desperate ill, and desperate ills required desperate remedies. If whites could use job reservation to promote their interests, why shouldn't blacks? One obvious answer is that two wrongs do not make a right, but the rather more subtle one is that job reservations, pervasive though it was, nevertheless had a much smaller impact than the present act will. The system, moreover, bore the seeds of its own destruction, whereas the present one, which favors the majority, will be far harder to unravel. If we cannot strike it down under the Constitution, we will be saddled with it forever, for no government will risk the unpopularity of repealing the act. It will, moreover, spawn a lot more laws making distributions according to race. And would you know it, that's exactly what we've seen today. Look at the Employment Equity Amendment Act, which is just like balmy in its conception. It's just absolutely nuts. And so you may look at that, especially as a black South African, and say, wow, that's just polemic. But you see, this BEE bullcrap has actually been tried before. It's actually been tried in a country called Namibia. Now, whites comprise just 1.8% of Namibia's population. That's roughly 54,000 out of 3 million. Of those, over 71% are 34 or younger. That means that they have never experienced disadvantaged status underneath the old system. In any case, Namibia's Affirmative Action Employment Act of 1998 was enacted 27 years ago, and again had black economic empowerment policies which aimed to address historical imbalances. Yet the civil service and security sectors are nearly 100% black. I mean, there's only 55,000 whites that live there. So why do these laws still persist that treat whites as second-class citizens in that country? In fact, last week, the Employment Equity Commission summoned 13 employers for non-compliance with the 1998 Act and threatened them criminal charges for failing to meet the affirmative action quotas. So consider this. There's 56% of whites, that's 30,000, are aged between 15 and 59. Of those, 18,000 were born after 1989, leaving just 11,000 born between 1964 and 1988. That's a mere 0.39% of Namibia's population. That's what the act is meant to amend, to address. 0.39% of Namibia's population. Now, the government insists that these laws are required to address historical imbalances, but they're not. They're just punitive. They've been there for over how many years? Same as South Africa. And they haven't grown the economy of Namibia. Now, have they? But this, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what was foretold when the original conception of the Employment Equity Act came through. Everybody knew this would be the case. It's nothing but reverse racism. And the government is saying, oh, it's not. But really, we are led by retards, because come on to the final news story of today. Now, this is the news story that during the African Water Investment Program Summit, the Water and Sanitation Minister became a viral sensation, not for her policies, but because of her antics and her address, which sparked widespread mockery on social media. In fact, don't take my word for it, Have a look yourself.
President Bogo said Botswana is a country that is water scarce. President Ramaphosa said that we are in control of serious things like rivers, waters, dams. So clouds are gathering, clouds are gathering, clouds are gathering. With powers vested in me by myself, may I request my honor? Do you want to come and call those who are supposed to respond? Others can respond to me. Just say, here's a message, pass this message with this billion and billion and billion. That will take us far. Billion, just a billion, just a small billion. Then those billions will give us 30 billion that we want. Is that good? Honorable leaders of state to stand.
Now, for those of you who don't know, the minister was addressing the Water and Investment Program Summit, whose aim it was to drum up money for the water-scarce Southern African countries. But according to her, South Africa is in control of its water crisis, even though it's not. We have numerous ongoing water challenges which affect numerous communities. In fact, we frequently see things like JoJo tanks and taps being rolled out as somehow amazing for South Africa. But in any case, everybody noted that the delivery was just incoherent and awkward and left many audience members bewildered and sparked a flurry of ridicule across social media. Because I hate to say it once again, our government is retarded. Our politicians are retarded. We have old men sitting in government that are retarded. These are not smart people. For South Africa to advance, the ANC must die. They hate us, hate them back, because let's be honest, they do not have the best interests of South Africa at heart. And at the end of the day, these are just my opinions. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.